Coral reefs worldwide have been in decline, especially during the last 4 to 5 decades. Starting in 1982, we saw the first major coral bleaching event tied directly to climate change and elevated seawater temperatures. Since then, the number of bleaching events tied to climate change and the areas that were devastated by these events has increased, and it's been very concerning, modeling into the future of what we expect over the decades to come.
Half the world's coral reefs are already dead, and we're currently on track to lose over 90% of the world's reefs by 2050. This is not some problem for the future, this is happening right now.
Coral reefs are truly amazing ecosystems that basically house about 25% of the world's ocean's biodiversity, even though they're just a few percent of the ocean's floor. These reefs have extensive value in terms of the biomass of organisms that live there, but also about 500 million people worldwide depend on coral reefs either directly or indirectly, with an estimated value of $1 trillion. We've seen these kind of triple whammies that hit Florida. First, they had a major hurricane, followed by a massive bleaching event tied to climate change. Actually, the hurricane is believed to have been higher because of climate change. And then they have a major coral disease outbreak right now. So these corals are getting hammered at every direction. And the problem is, it's not only the acute nature of these disturbances, the magnitude, but the frequency is such that they're just not having a chance to catch a breath between one devastating event after another.
Climate change is one of the big threats that's killing coral reefs these days. That's why we have these massive bleaching events, is because the temperatures are too hot and the corals can't survive in those warming ocean conditions.
We get coral bleaching, which is called bleaching because the skeletons show up as white. And as they lose these algae, they lose their major form of nutrition, and subsequently they die. Coral bleaching events have just been occurring with such a frequency now that coral reefs don't have any chance to recover between events. So coral reefs provide the habitat. When we say a coral reef, it's not just coral, that's probably the most obvious creature there, but they provide homes for thousands of species of fish, tens of thousands of species of invertebrates, a variety of algae, all of which have not only important ecosystem value, but are critical to the lives and livelihoods of people living throughout the tropics, and especially on tropical coral reef islands.
This is not just an ecological tragedy, but a socioeconomic catastrophe. And our thought was, if we can team up with some of the world's leading coral scientists and then develop a business model to do ecosystem scale restoration, that could help keep reefs alive for future generations until our leaders figure out how to protect them in the first place.
With these major bleaching events, the time scale is so quick and so short that corals neither have the opportunity to acclimate, nor do populations have the ability to respond. And this is the concern that we can help address through the various restoration techniques.
At Coralvita, we're innovating in the space of reef restoration, doing things to accelerate coral growth rates up to 50 times faster than they grow in nature. That's like growing a dinner plate sized coral in a year rather than decades, as well as building that resiliency against warming and more acidic oceans through a technique called assisted evolution. And we're combining all of these leading techniques into a single scalable model. We can then bring that to the world at unprecedented scales.
There are a variety of tools that various practitioners have come up with, one of which is very interesting and very valuable is called microfragmenting. The idea of microfragging is that corals actually have an immunological identity, and if you take small fragments of a coral, if they're genetically identical, they will fuse. If you take a lot of these small fragments and you glue them over a large area, they grow more quickly than they would if they continue to grow as a single colony. By using techniques like microfragging, you can get a cover back on that remaining dead coral skeleton, and you can do it in less than a decade.
With microfragmenting, we can accelerate growth rates in the land-based system to grow many, many more species of coral, while at the same time bringing down the cost per coral for restoration and making them more resilient against threats like warming and acidifying oceans.
As you can see behind me, there are a number of tanks. We call them raceways, and we're housing a number of species of coral in these raceways. When these species have reached a certain size, we can then actually transplant them to reefs surrounding the area, secure them to the bottom of the substrate, and we do lots of monitoring over time. We also look at how the greater ecosystem changes, and we hope that the corals do well enough that they continue to grow on their own.
We also use the farms as education centers, the core part of our model to integrate communities in these countries as much as possible. So using the farms as hands-on learning centers, building local capacity as well as hiring locally, that's really essential to what we do. So we take all those things together as a way to grow corals at scale that are more diverse, resilient, and affordable. Even if we were to hit the Paris goals or exceed them tomorrow, ocean temperatures are going to keep warming. And the way our government and industrial and media leaders are acting, we're not going to hit our climate targets nearly soon enough. And so we must rapidly scale up adaptation solutions like coral farming and restoration as we still continue pushing for mitigation solutions. We must solve for climate change rapidly, but at the same time, jumpstart fields like our own. There are communities that have existed for decades, centuries, millennia alongside coral reefs and at the fabric of their society and their livelihoods. And so you think about from an economic perspective, from an ecological perspective, from a human well-being perspective, there's so many different ways to think about why coral reefs matter to all people everywhere, even if you've never seen one, enjoyed one, or lived near one. This is just one ecosystem, but it is essential to life on Earth. There is no excuse for inaction.